Well, hello everyone and welcome. Welcome back to Sama Saturday, where we come together every Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific time to share about holistic wellness for our canine companions and friends, because they are definitely those in our lives and they're so important to us that's why we love to spend time with the experts out there in the world, sharing their information with all of you as you tune in each weekend. So thank you so much for being back with us. My name is Amanda Ree. I'm the founder of Sama Dog and helping to facilitate these opportunities to bring these wonderful speakers to all of you. And today is no different because we have two really amazing people. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to share and for you to meet these beings. Well, one of them you already know, Dr. Katie Kangas, a fabulous integrative veterinarian here in the San Diego area. Hi, Katie. Welcome back with us.
Hello. Thank you. It's my pleasure, as always, to be here today, and I'm super excited about our topic. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we all are, because we've been talking about having Billy come on our show for quite a while. So I want to introduce Billy Hoekman, also seen as William there on the screen, as you can see. And but we like to call him Billy, and he is an amazing being that I will formally introduce here in just one moment. But he is like this master of dog food. He is the leader of one of the best dog food companies out there in the market today, and he will be sharing all of his wisdom with us. So let me share with you a little bit more about his background, and then we'll turn it over. So he is the Nutrition Science Director for Answers Pet Food, which many of you may have heard of or even feed your dogs currently. It's one of the most popular brands, rightfully so. And he is involved in formulation, research, product development, working with the farms, and science education. He specializes in developing diets that pertain to specific disease conditions. Billy regularly attends the AAFCO meetings, which is the National Pet Food Regulation Committee, and which thank goodness he's there. We'll talk more about that. Participates frequently in expert panels and routinely speaks around the country in venues ranging from universities to public libraries. So needless to say, he really knows a thing or two about pet food, and but knowing all of us know that the foundation of our health and our animals' health is certainly food. There are a lot of influences to that. That's why we have so many topics to talk about in this show. But the big one certainly is the nourishment, giving the body health through what we consume. And that is what we're going to focus in on today because it's such an important topic. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Katie now, and she can share a little bit more about this topic, why we're here today, and what are your thoughts first as we get going into the conversation of raw food.
Thank you, Amanda. And for anybody who's seen me speak before or seen any of my articles, most people know my passion in helping pets to heal and live better lives and better well-being is through food medicine. And although I'm, holistic veterinarian, I utilize a lot of modalities in my practice. I'm Chinese medicine trained. I certainly use acupuncture and herbs and things, but I'm very into taking an approach with my patients that's called functional medicine, which really truly focuses on food medicine. And some may know, if they're local to me, my prescription list literally starts with food. So every time I get to see a patient, no matter what condition, what health condition they're coming to me for, or actually also for just wellness and preventative health, everything starts with recommendations on food. So we always have a discussion on diet, but I also like to recommend medicinal foods or functional foods to complement the diet. And I'm thrilled to have Answers products in my practice now. Again, on my go home list that I create for my clients after we've done a session with their pet, I actually have specific foods and diet discussion on there. And fermented foods and Answers products are always on my list. And we have a discussion about why raw foods and fermented foods are so healthy for the body, and Billy's going to expand on that for us today. But I can just do a brief lead in the fact that I'm speaking more to people about the microbiome and how critically important that is in our health and our pets' health. And for anybody who hasn't heard that word yet, I like to describe it as the ecosystem of bacteria, friendly bacteria that are living within our bodies and our pets' bodies. And a kind of creepy but cool fact to know is that we are more bacteria than we are human cells. And your dog has more bacteria in their body than they do canine cells. So it gives us a quick perspective to understand that we need to be living in harmony with these bacteria that are, excuse me, making up such a monumental element in our body that not only supports our immune system, but our gut health, our brain health, and everything else. And so this is a really important factor in looking at health. And honestly, I really don't recommend necessarily anymore a consistent use of probiotics, because we're starting to understand that the diversity of the microbiome in the body is so important. And generally, probiotic products have just a small number of bacteria in them, sometimes not even bacteria that are intended to be residents or won't take up residence in the gut of the pet or the person. And so it's actually much more effective to be eating fermented foods on a regular basis. And so, you know, a lot of people are aware of the information that's come out on the benefits of probiotics, but some people may not be aware of the power of fermented foods. And so Billy is no better expert than to share that with us today. And I'm thrilled that I've been able to incorporate the Answers products into my prescription recommendations and overall recommendations. And when Billy and I finally got to meet in person several months ago, he actually did an in-person presentation with us at my practice here in San Diego, and it was phenomenal. And we literally had people drive hours away to attend our in-person presentation, because Billy's a fantastic presenter and speaker, and his knowledge is just infusing in his passion. And so we align very well. And I'm thrilled to turn it over to him and see if we want to take our topics in some more detailed direction here.
Well, I mean, if that's the intro, I'm tempted to be like, all right, good night. We'll see you later. So, but thank you. No, it sort of belays the point in saying, you know, a lot of people say, well, why doesn't my veterinarian, you know, why don't veterinarians support raw? And I say, well, it depends on which one, right? And because we have, you know, veterinarians just like you across the country who carry Answers products, who recommend Answers products. So we are always, you know, eternally grateful for everything you're doing in introducing those modalities. I think it's kind of cool and relevant to mention right off the bat, and this is fresh on my mind because of the fact that we were just looking at this study, but this will show you how integral the microbiome is to you know, a mammal's health. So there is actually a study that was done with mice, and we love this study, and I think you'll know why in a second. But so what they did was they took mice that were specifically allergic to egg protein and would develop asthma and allergy reactions because of said egg protein, right? So first they did that, and control group 1 was just those mice. Those mice, guess what happened? They developed allergy and asthma symptoms and got unhealthier as the study went on. So the second group, they actually took the same egg protein and the same mice that were genetically predisposed to that, and they actually brought in dirt from a monoculture farm. And a monoculture farm means they're only having one crop. So, like for instance, a crop that's not very good for the soil. So, for instance, let's say you just grow corn and soybeans in rotation or something like that. That's a monoculture farm. So they put this dirt on the egg protein for the second group, and guess what happened? They still got allergies and they still got asthma. So they took a third group, and this is my favorite part about it, because we work with a lot of Amish farmers. They put on something called Amish dust, which was what it was called in the actual study. So these in this Amish farm was a polyculture farm, which means that there are not only crops, but there's also chickens and pigs and cows, right? Because a lot of people don't know this, but in terms of restoring the soil, you need ruminant animals to restore the topsoil. So, you know, you can kind of get into the minutia of farming and what's good and bad for the environment, but if there is no ruminant animals, there is no topsoil. So anyway, they took this Amish dust from this polyculture farm, and they, same mice, same genetic predisposition, same egg protein, and guess what? No allergies and no asthma symptoms, and they kept getting healthier as the actual study went on. And this is they're predisposed to get these genetic conditions. So even that, I mean, you're talking about It's the same reason that children develop less allergies and asthma when they grow up on a farm, because of the fact that you look at those soil-borne organisms in the food, or around them, and they're playing in dirt and they're around these animals. It's the same reason why you want your kids to grow up with a dog in the house, because they're bringing all of those probiotics and all of that good bacteria in the house. And so it's not only what you eat, but it's also your environment. And the really cool thing, relaying that to what we do is, we have organic fermented vegetables in our food, which are fermented on the farm. And guess what? We only half wash them. Why? Because we want that Amish dust in the food. And we have organic pastured duck eggs in our food. And guess where those ducks lay their eggs? In the mud. And guess what we keep on those eggs? The mud. Because we want all of, not only the fermentation and the actual bacteria content that we're getting from that process, but also those soil-borne organisms. So your pet is their environment and what they eat, and that's what makes up their microbiome. So you have to make it healthy.
Wow, that is such a fantastic study to really give people a perspective of, all of these factors that can make such a difference. So that is tremendous. Thanks for sharing that.
So Billy, tell us. Oh, well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for on a side note, I may have called Samuel, one of our farmers. I'm going to be up at the plant next this coming week, and I may have called him and said, like, okay, don't think I'm weird, but please go out to your pasture where your Jersey cows are and take a glass jar and dig up some dirt for me, because I want to, take it home and do some experimentation myself. He might have thought I was a little weird, but that's what we do at Answers Pet Food.
And
it's probably not the first time.
And I did want to mention, just on the story that Billy just gave in that study, that Billy wrote an article for Dogs Naturally just an edition or two ago on how ruminants grazing on the soil and defecating and all of that cycle through the soil is so helpful for, as you said, with all the beneficial bacteria and things in the soil to make everything healthier for our food system, but also for the planet. And so it's a fantastic article and kind of goes into a little more background about what Billy was just speaking to. So if anyone hasn't seen that yet, you may want to look for it. It's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Billy, I would love to know a little bit about your background. I'm sure our viewers would too, and how you got into this, and what is Answers? Not everybody knows what, of course, it's a pet food, but what kind of pet food? What are kind of the general offerings? How did it come to exist in this world?
Well, I'll start with what is Answers Pet Food, because I think, not to come off as corny, but that's the important thing, because Answers is really just a team effort. I mean, it goes down from, my bosses, the family that owns the company, to, our plant workers, to our truck driver. I mean, everyone plays as intricate of a role, in my opinion. So Answers Pet Food is a small family-owned company. We're based in Pennsylvania. So when I mean family, it's literally a family of about 5 people that own the company. We don't take on outside investors, because the first thing that happens when you take on outside investors is those investors need to make year over year more money. And how do they do that? They cut the quality of the food. So we want to remain, our only sales pitch has ever been, it's the best possible thing, either do it or don't, right? If you want to do it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. We're not going to get everybody in the world, right? So we are the only producer of fermented raw pet food. So fermentation makes us not only the safest product on the market, but also the healthiest product on the market. We proved we're the safest product on the market by doing a 16-week validation study, which actually proves statistically that not only is our food safe throughout its shelf life, but it's also statistically the most safe when you mishandle it. So when we tested it after somebody left it out for 48 hours at room temperature, was mishandled, it was actually statistically safer than when it was sitting in your fridge, which is very safe as well. So we have the data. What we're trying to do is bridge the gap between veterinarians and say, okay, we have the data to prove it's safe, right? And also what do those bacteria eat? They eat the actual food itself. So they're pre-digesting the food. So not only is it easier to metabolize, so you feed less of it, but also those bacteria create new organic acids, new vitamins, and new nutrients in the actual food. So you kind of get not only the innate benefits of raw food as well, but you also get the innate benefits of the fermentation. And so currently, as mentioned, we're the only people who do that. Some other things that make us unique are as far as I know, we're the only pet food company that actually produces a good amount of our own ingredients. So for instance, Samuel, that same guy that I was talking about with the cows, grows about 100,000 pounds of vegetables and ferments them right on his farm for us. He also processes our chickens that we actually raise specifically for Answers Pet Food. And in doing that, in fermenting food, you have to source impeccably. So what I mean by that is if you took a cow that was living on a feedlot, you would have a prevalence of pathogens in that food, so E. coli or Listeria or Salmonella or something. So we have to use, for instance, 100% grass-fed beef throughout its entire life cycle because of the fact that we need to start out with an environment that has as good. And I will say, to illustrate that point, in terms of our sourcing, my absolute favorite thing to bring up is, so we have a chicken product, and chicken gets kind of a bad rap in the pet food industry. So I think people, there's a lot of allergies to it, but I would argue that it depends a lot on the chicken and how that chicken is processed, what is surrounding that chicken, all that stuff. So 75% of our chicken we get from other farms. This is GAP, which is the Global Animal Partnership, rated 3 and 4. This is certified organic. These chickens are outside. These chickens, are able to engage in natural behaviors by, eating grass and bugs and being out, in that environment. This is, if you went to like Whole Foods or a co-op, the best chicken you could buy in the country. So for instance, that's 75% of our chicken. Now but what we don't like about that is a lot of people are very sort of put at ease by a USDA. Our meat is USDA. That's good, but it's also bad. And the reason I say that USDA meat is also bad is because if your meat is going through a USDA facility, they're doing a lot of pathogen reduction steps. And what are those steps? You're going to take that beautiful organic bird and you're going to dip it in parasitic acid. You're going to dip it in, chlorine-like solutions. You're going to go through a bunch of chemical washes to reduce pathogens. So that is the reality, and that's a lot of the meat that is in our products is using that because it's the best that we can possibly do. However, 25% of our chickens in our chicken formula, the first 25% is the whole chicken, and those chickens are raised by Samuel's father, Levi, who then walks them over, because their farms are right next to each other, to be processed on the farm. And the really cool thing about that is we only wash them in raw whey, which we also use to ferment a lot of our foods during that process. So what that means realistically for the people, using the food is that product doesn't exist in America for humans, meaning the best chicken in America only goes into Answers Pet Food. So you are, by definition, feeding your dog better than you're feeding yourself, even if you eat very cleanly, if you're feeding our food. And that's kind of the thing we like to do. So we make a full line of complete and balanced dog and cat food. We were the first to bring on fermented, or we were the first to bring raw dairy to the mass market pet industry about 10 years ago. And we have 2 types of fermented raw dairy. We have 2 fermented bone broths, and we have a treat line, which includes 8 types of raw cheese for dogs and cats, and also newly a fermented raw chicken feed as well for, teeth cleaning and nourishment and sort of that way. So the company was actually started, I've been with the company virtually the entire time, but the company was essentially, it was started by the whole family, and the vision really started with my 2 bosses, which are 2 sisters. And Jacqueline is a microbiologist and was a vet tech for 15 years, and Roxanne has her master's degree in nutrition and fermentation and dairy science. So obviously you can see where the microbiology and the nutrition and dairy, fermentation came in there. So for me, so what a lot of people don't know is, one, I'm 100% self-taught. So I have made my way through this. I always like to tell people I'm a college dropout, so I dropped out after 1 semester at the time, and it was really neat because when I started with Answers Pet Food, and my bosses will tell you that I stalked them because I was like, you have to hire me because I can't work for anyone else. And they did, although I worked for free for 2 years. So that is what's called paying your dues. So, and I didn't know the company was just starting when I came on. And so, And I wasn't always obviously the nutrition science director. I've kind of worked my way up through that. But my story started with my dog. I have a pug named Lua, and I never ever had any pets growing up. I had fish for a short period of time, and I believe like a parakeet at one point, but never had a dog or a cat growing up because my brother was very allergic to them. I was very scared of dogs for most of my childhood. And when I got Lua, I said, what do I feed this, dog? And that question never became uninteresting to me. So I can learn and think about that, constantly. My wife will tell you I talk about 3 to 4 things, and that's pretty much it for uh, our conversation. So, and nutrition is one of those things. And so, the really cool thing is when I came to the company and met Jacqueline and Roxanne, we all got to the same place, but through different avenues. So what they'll tell you is, they didn't have to train me because we all reached the same conclusions, because if you just follow the science, it leads to what we're doing. And lastly, I would say that's why I would rather, I choose to also work other avenues like writing for Dogs Naturally and working in different nutritional forums by virtue of the fact that I want people to learn the science so they can make a decision in an ever-changing pet food world. So I know that if they follow the science, they'll always get back to us anyway. But it's not good to know about a pet food company. It's good to know about the science behind why pet food works. So therefore, you might be feeding brand X and brand X then sells out. Then what do you do, right? And so that's kind of my mission, in general.
And I love the science behind it, and just the food medicine aspect is so fantastic.
Mm-hmm. It's great to hear your story, Billy. I told you I was excited to hear that because I didn't know how this all came about or how Answers even came about. Although it's a pet food that I laugh because I didn't even have to look up the website, because I go to the website, no joke, probably 5 to 10 times a day, cutting and pasting things for people or researching things or looking at ingredients. And it's just a great resource of information and obviously such a spectacular product. So it's wonderful to hear a little bit of the background and how you make it. I want to recognize all of you that are on listening to us right now. Some of our fans are here. We've got Jenny and Linda and Noemi and Courtney. We've got some questions that have come up. Karen has one. Hi, Rena. Rena's over in Maui, and she even got up early to be able to tune in with us because she's such a fan. Jane is here. Dirk, Sandra, Vicento, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here in this conversation. We really appreciate you sharing this as well. Your engagement is key, and sharing it out with the other animal lovers and animal keepers in your life will help us so much to be able to spread this information and help many dogs and cats to live healthier, happier lives, and therefore humans to live healthier, happier lives too, because we're all interwoven. There is only oneness in all of this existence of ours. And we're so intimately woven together with our animals, even our microbiome, just to touch on that for a moment. They've done research now to show how much of the microbiome of the animals living in our homes are the same as within our own gut. So there is a lot more being exchanged than we even realize. So with that said, thank you all for being here again and for sharing it. Just clicking that share button real quick and getting the word out makes such a difference for us and for this message. So Billy, one thing that a lot of people that I speak with are curious about, which you already touched on a bit, is the safety of raw food. But there's these myths that are kind of out there on the streets, and you hear them all the time, and I'm sure you speak to them all the time. So pull, if you will, just 2 or 3 of them for us and explain what are some of the common concerns or questions that come up, and then we'll get into some audience questions.
Well, I would say the first one, again, going back to the safety part. I mean, even if you're looking at, let's say, a non-fermented raw diet, if you look at a study, there was a study that came out of Finland, I believe, like this week or last week, in looking at analyzing these diets and coming to the conclusion that only 0.2% of people who actually use a raw diet are actually dealing with issues with pathogens. So that would be a lower percent. I mean, even if you look at the CDC data, they're saying that 30% of dogs shed salmonella regardless of what they eat. Doesn't matter if it's kibble, canned, raw. But the really neat thing, so I don't think there's a big risk there regardless. But the nice thing is we are, taking that risk down even more and doing that fermentation. And so, going back to that study that we did, the safety validation that we did, we can actually show that, hey, look, when you thaw out the food in your refrigerator, we can quantify the number one, is there any E. coli, salmonella, or listeria in the food? And then we can actually quantify the amount of probiotics or lactic acid bacteria in the food. So we can actually show you, look, of all these samples, it starts out at this number. And then we did 7 days in the refrigerator as well. So we did right when it was thawed, 24 to 48 hours, 7 days in the refrigerator because that's the lifespan of the food. And then we did the 24 hours at room temperature and 48 hours at room temperature. And not only is it becoming safer because we can see that those pathogens are not growing or else they are not there, right? Not only is that the case, but we can see those probiotics growing to the point where 1 ounce of our food has about 2 to 2.5 billion probiotics. And that's hundreds of species because we're using this food matrix of bacteria to actually ferment the food. And that number, when left out at room temperature for 48 hours, jumped to over 12.5 billion probiotics per ounce in the actual food itself. So there is no way that someone can argue that our food is not safe. And if they do, they're not looking at the data and reaching a reasonable conclusion. And if you're not following the laws of argument to reach reasonable conclusions, then I can't help you. So raw food, and especially fermented raw food, is absolutely safe. And I will say on one side note that that's what we're trying to do and bridge the gap between some of the veterinarians that might not recommend raw. So I was able to present some of this data this year to some students at Cornell, and basically I said to the room, hey, look, half of you are going to support raw food and half of you aren't. But even for those of you that aren't, your clients are going to do it anyway. So if you don't believe it's safe, why don't we meet in the middle and say, if you're going to do that, I don't support it, but at least use a fermented raw because I can look at data and show that it's safe. So that's probably the biggest question we get, but also it's just not, at least in our case, I can only speak really for what we're doing in terms of how we process, how we make the food. But fermented raw food is 100% safe, and I would argue the last point on that would be we are the only company that actually has a built-in safety step. So if the food is mishandled, we can prove that it's safer. So, and you can't say that about any other form of pet food. I would say the second biggest one, and I think you guys did probably covered this a little bit. I think you guys did one on DCM and that
Yes.
can of worms.
Yes.
So is that the diets aren't balanced. So like specifically with that, with that FDA report for DCM, I'll put report in air quotes because they didn't really make a viable connection when it comes to but they mentioned that a lot of these diets are not balanced, and they just kind of said let's say if you implicate grain-free diets, if you implicate raw diets or boutique diets, but really that doesn't make any sense because you have to analyze the diet itself. I'm sure there are a lot of raw diets that are incomplete, but that doesn't mean that I'm sure there's a lot of kibbles that are not complete. I'm sure there's a lot of diets in every avenue of pet food that are not complete and balanced. What does that even really mean anyway? Because I, for one, don't have 100% understanding of physics and biology and nutrition science. Therefore, I can't sit here and say this 100% has everything your pet needs. However, if you look at our diet and the balanced issue, we not only formulate to meet those AFCO profiles of complete and balanced, which I think is important, but also we take it one step further, and this is very unique in the raw food industry. But we also on our detailed chicken cat formula, we actually have a year-long feeding trial, not only for adult maintenance, but also for growth and lactation. So, and then we can formulate our other foods based on those nutrients, right? And we also have not only an adult maintenance feeding trial on our detailed dog formula, but we also just finished lactation and growth as well. So, and the feeding trials actually trump the nutritional part of it, but we do both of those things. We formulate to meet AFCO, and we also have the feeding trials to back up our own data. So now if I walk into, a vet's office, I can say, look, I can prove to you it's safe, and I can prove that we're meeting the nutritional profiles. So what objection could you possibly have to our food in that point, right?
Yeah, that's impressive for a raw food company to be doing feeding trials. So I commend you, and I think that's such excellent information to be sharing not only with pet parents but with veterinarians so they can feel more comfortable. The other thing that I really like about the raw diets that Answers creates is, Billy, if you want to speak to the formulation or the ratio of the ingredients in there as a food medicine, practitioner, I really like to recommend more organ meat generally in the diet. And there's so many, especially when people home prepare diets, but a lot of the commercially prepared diets are fairly low in organ meat. And organ meat is so nutritionally dense. It's very medicinal to the body, very strength building, brings a lot of different nutrients. And, most people, if you haven't really thought of this perspective before, if you watch a wild animal, any kind of carnivore, a wild canine or feline, kill a prey animal for consumption, the first thing that they go to eat is the inner body parts, what we call the viscera, which is the spleen and liver and kidneys and lungs and heart and all that. And so as a promoting food medicine, I'm oftentimes recommending more organ meat in their diet, and Answers actually includes more organ meat. And maybe Billy can speak to that. And I just wanted to add in the fact that I liked when Billy explained the processing on the farms, that we now have a good perspective at how these foods that are created by Answers are not only humanely raised, which is so important, but that they're raised in a fashion that brings the nutrient density up as well. So these products are so nutritious, and I really love the formulation behind them as well as the science. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, and it's important too. And the other thing that people don't really talk about is the actual, if you're not processing as humanely as possible as well, the actual stress hormones, that can go into what your pet's actually eating. So, I'm very proud to say that, for instance, in 75% of our chickens and also in our pigs, because pork is one of those things where if you eat pork, you got to make sure that it's ethically raised, because that can be some of the most unethical farming, I think, that exists. And so 75% of our chickens and our pigs are actually what's called CO2 stunned. So which is very important, because what happens is they go into a room and they actually fall asleep, and then they die in their sleep, and then they're processed after that's done. Now, some people don't like hearing about that, but we are feeding carnivores, and we are feeding things that eat other animals. So it's imperative that we treat those animals with respect, even if they're food animals. But also, it is true that in that time that they're actually alive, if they're eating their native diet, and if they're out in the sun, and if they're engaging in these behaviors, the nutrition changes completely. So going back to what you were talking about in the organ meat, I would say that most diets, just generally, it doesn't even have to be raw food diets, are either low to very, very low in organ meat. And you could get into the definition of what is an organ. An organ is technically any grouping of cells in the body that performs a function. So I would put eyes, your skin, all of that in there. But when we're talking about raw feeding, we're talking about typically, heart is a debatable one, but, you're talking about liver and kidney and things like that. These are by far the most, nutrient dense parts of the animal. So if I was to put my list of the most nutrient dense, healthiest foods on earth, it would be raw milk, eggs, organ meats, and fermented fish, right? That would be my, sort of my number one on the list. And so we actually use 30% organs in our food, where most people are using about 10, where that would be about 5% liver. And we think that has a lot to do with why our diet works so well. But also adding in those other reproductive foods like whole eggs and, raw milk and things like that is important as well. But I think the misconception in organ meat actually comes from fat-soluble vitamins. So fat-soluble vitamins, people are afraid to feed more organ meat because fat-soluble vitamins store in the fat tissue, and you can actually overdose on them. So a good example would be the recent recall where some animals were getting sick or even dying from vitamin D toxicity in prescription diets. So the only reason that happened is because it was added vitamin D. So what happens is in nature, those fat-soluble vitamins actually appear together. So you have vitamin A, which is very important, vitamin D, and vitamin K2. And you need all of the, when they appear together, they all have built-in mechanisms to not only help each other digest, but built-in safety mechanisms. So the floor, or I should say the ceiling on that toxicity actually rises. So there really is no toxicity. So I would say that most animals are fat-soluble vitamin deficient, and those are not easy vitamins to find. In fact, most of the time they're very hard. If you look at something like vitamin D, we have to not only put in duck eggs that are, our ducks are amazing. We have about 3,000 ducks, and they're on 6 acres, and they just spread out in that entire thing, and they forage. They're out in the sun. Ducks are great because they're real pasture raised, because they will actually use that entire pasture. But we're using, pasture raised ducks, we're using grass-fed beef, we're using that high organ content. We also even put in fermented cod livers and high vitamin raw butter to get all of those fat-soluble vitamins. So if you're not making a concerted effort to get those things into the food, you're going to pretty much be fat-soluble vitamin deficient. And that's one of the reasons why our dogs are in such, I would say, bacteria and nutritional deficiencies are the two things that are really plaguing our dogs, and why we're seeing lifespans, the average lifespan, go down. And why you're seeing, for instance, I'm sure, Katie, you see this all the time, the lab comes into your practice at generally around 6, 7, 8 years old, and all of a sudden, wait, there's skin issues and their joints don't work anymore, and they're having digestive issues, and people don't connect that to food. Oftentimes
Right.
I hear people come and they say, why is this happening? And I say, well, what are you feeding? And they say, well, it's not the food. We've been doing the same food for 7 years. Well, it is the food. It just took
It's
7 years for those deficiencies to actually present themselves.
You're
And so,
so right. It's cumulative, and vitamin D deficiency is a real issue in dogs and cats. And it's estimated, and I've seen in my practice at least 80%. And I routinely test, are low in vitamin D, and surprisingly, that's actually occurring in pets that are eating every format of food, certainly home prepared diets, because a lot of times those are not balanced appropriately and supplemented appropriately, but also in pets that are eating kibble and all other formats of food, the freeze dried, the raw, everything. And so vitamin D on my list of, medicinal foods or functional foods to add in, definitely raw milk. And so Answers, gives us such a good product to fill that. And then eggs as well. And these are high vitamin D foods, as is cod liver oil and liver and other organ meats, and then even mushrooms. So I recommend powdered mushrooms a lot. But vitamin D is very involved with chronic inflammation. So when the body doesn't have adequate levels of D, it is very difficult to, or impossible to, resolve inflammation. So this deficiency has been linked to every chronic disease, and skin included, heart disease, cancer, everything else. And as Billy mentioned, this is definitely a cumulative thing. And then the microbiome being so important, so many of us, throughout our lives, and our pets have been treated with multiple rounds of antibiotics. But beyond that, most people are aware there's so many antibiotics being used in the food animal industry today, and places that are not taking good care of and doing organic raising like Answers is. But, all these antibiotics in our world, not to mention, hand sanitizers, antibacterial soaps. It's like we're antimicrobially, antimicrobing the world here. And it's really causing a deficiency in everyone's critical diversity of microbiome that's helping your immune system. And even just the soil study with the mice that, eating the egg protein that Billy referred to, that natural microbiome from the crop rotation and the beneficial bacteria in the soil is huge. So this is just, all information that really helps people get a perspective of the importance in the health of our pets and ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So we're here with Billy from Answers Pet Food, everyone. I know there's a few people that have just jumped on, so I want to just do a very brief reintroduction. And Dr. Katie Kangas, also, who was just speaking. Answers is one of the pet food brands out in the market today, because I know there's a few questions of kind of what are we talking about? Like, where does this fit in the world, and what is Answers? So it's one of the brands. It's a brand that you can find mostly at natural pet food stores. You won't find this brand, and of course you two can correct me, but I'm pretty sure you don't find this at PetSmart or Petco or any of those large or say big box companies. But all the boutique natural pet food stores that I know in this area, they all carry it. Many of the veterinary offices carry it as well. So there are several different varieties of foods that they have. Their primary, I would say, is their raw foods. So they pre-blend, pre-mix all the different ingredients that they've been talking about, the meats, the organs, the bones, the tissues. They mix it all together and then put it into a container for us that it's in the freezer, and then we de-thaw it and then would scoop out a certain amount, measured amount for our animals. They also have milks and stocks, so that would be in cartons. Most all their products are in cartons, but these would be just like additional foods, supplementary foods. You could say snacks, but super, super healthy snacks. Your dog will love these snacks more than anything, especially the raw fermented goat milk. That's something that on a daily basis we should like record ourselves because we talk about it so much, but that is just because it's such a great quality and supplement food to give, whether it's mixed in with food or whether it's maybe a midday snack. They also have stocks like the fish stock. Everything's fermented, which we've been talking about, and Billy explained a bit more about that. And then they also have treats and all kinds of different treats, some new ones that I was just learning about. But one of my favorites are fermented cheese cubes. So you could literally put together like a whole cheese platter for your pups. And it looks like blue cheese or other types of cheeses. And these are extremely good for our dogs. So something I have found great benefit in these, not only just as a good snack, but maybe disguising medicines or a supplement that you're trying to give. You can put a little bit of cheese as we do. Why not give our dogs some super healthy cheese and really make it worth their while? So that's just an overview of what the heck this is and what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I should hire you.
Right? And I love the fact that, you know, their foods taste like treats to the pets. And these are such, you know, complete and medicinal foods offering so many benefits, yet to them, it is the tastiest, yummiest snack. So it's really a fun thing to be able to feed these wonderful foods. And the milk, and Billy can maybe speak to this a little bit more too, just so people know that raw fermented milk or raw milk, and then the fermentation just, you know, ups the level of benefit to the body. But raw milk is, when it's not pasteurized or heated, is an absolute complete food. So, you know, all the nutrients, the vitamins, you know, amino acids, minerals are in raw milk when it's not pasteurized. So when you are feeding this to your dog, they are getting such a complete food source. And there are actually dogs that are even doing what we call goat milk fasting, where they're just consuming fermented raw milk from the Answers company for a period of 30, 60, 90, or sometimes, you know, even days, even longer, to help basically drop inflammation in the body, reset the microbiome, feed the body all these, you know, very nutritious components that are helping to really reverse diseases and autoimmune problems and skin conditions. So I have a number of patients now that are using the raw milk fast as a health changer. So it's really a fantastic option to be aware of. And Answers, I believe, has a pretty nice write-up on their website. They've created a 20-some page document to explain what it does. They've got calculators to figure out how to give the proper, you know, amount, volume to your dog, how many ounces per day for their ideal body weight, that sort of thing. So it's nice for people to understand what a complete and nutritious food just the raw milk is, not to mention all the other great products that, you know, they do create. So
Yeah, and well, a few things. So the first one is, if you look on the back of the cheese box, there's a dad joke on there, and I wrote that. I'm very proud of it. So just if you look at the back and see that little joke at the end of the paragraph describing what it is, just think of me chuckling at my computer like a dork. So the second part with that, and actually my dog here, I'm not at my house right now, is doing the milk diet today. So she does the milk diet once a week. And she gets half of her calories from our fermented raw cow milk kefir and half of her calories from our fermented raw goat milk. I'd highly, you know, recommend that sort of moving forward. So milk, it's very tragic because it gets such a bad rap because of the fact that milk is not only pasteurized typically that people are using, but it's also, when you look at the production of it, these are cows that are eating grains. These are cows that are eating much worse things than grains. If going to AFCO meetings, you find out very quickly that the feed, because they regulate the feed animals that you're consuming, or the eggs that you eat, or the milk that you drink. You find out very quickly that those animals are eating some things that you don't want them to eat. Like, for instance, if you're drinking dairy from the grocery store, 10% of that cow's diet can be grocery store waste that doesn't have to legally be removed from the plastic packaging. So what is the consequence of drinking milk from a cow that eats Skittles and plastic? I have no idea, but I don't want that tested on me, right? And so, but milk in its raw, and in our case, raw fermented form, and by the way, what we're doing there is we're taking nature's most efficient food. So we've had animals live for 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 6 years on just raw milk and water with certain health conditions. Animals that would certainly no longer be with us if they were not living in that under that circumstance. And why is that? Because we formulate foods at Answers Pet Food to meet all of those markers I was talking about in those feeding trial tests. But this is biology and evolution actually making food. So this is a food that's digested within 20 minutes. It's a food that has virtually every known vitamin and mineral, right? The other cool thing is all those are made to be food. So that's not true of any other food you eat. An orange or a cow does not exist to be food. It exists in the food chain, but it exists to propagate its own line and to be a species and to continue on, right? So milk is not that way. So the really cool thing about milk is you digest 100% of every nutrient every time you drink it. So if you are eating an orange at home right now and you say, "Oh, I'm getting this vitamin C," you might only be digesting 10% of that vitamin C. That is untrue with milk. Milk has over 200 species of probiotics, even before we ferment it. Then we're fermenting it on top of that. It has every known digestive enzyme. It actually takes no work from the pancreas to digest. It rests the liver, it rests the kidney. So doing that 1 week or 1 day a week milk diet, or doing the 30-day milk diet, which if you're going to do it for any extended period, I recommend at least 30 days. In fact, raw milk has basically the same nutritional profile as blood without the red blood cells. And so you can imagine to see why it's such a healthy option for these animals. And so, and I was going to mention as well, so if you want any of information on the milk diet, or if you want information on any of our other diets, so we have specific disease protocols where we work with case studies for kidney disease, diabetes, a lot of different health issues. Reach out to us. We can't actually put those on our website. It's our wonderful government. So if you reach out to us, the best way to reach out to us right now is on Facebook Messenger. We also have an email address, which is info@answerspet.com, but you will get the fastest response if you just send us a direct message on Facebook and say, "Hey, we have a full product guide. We have a full health guide for dogs and cats." We now have separate versions of those. And also, and I'll have to send this to you, Katie, but one of the things that we updated in our health guides was not just the diet. So if you're familiar with like our kidney diet is double the recommended amount of our fermented fish stock, half of the rest of their calories in fermented raw dairy, and then half of the rest of the calories in our detailed formula. So not only do those sheets have what the ratio is and why it works, but I added onto each one a worksheet. And so anyone at home, if you just follow the steps from 1 through 6 or 7 or 8 or however many steps there are, you can figure out exactly what to feed your animal. So it's like doing an at-home consultation. So I promise, well, a lot of people look at that before there was the worksheet and go, "How do I figure this out?" And the problem is there's only one of me, and there's many, many, many of people who email me. And so I had to create a system by which you could do it at home. So if you have an animal with a health issue out there right now, you can reach out to us and we can send that so you can get started. And all those protocols are made of the existing products we have. So you're not going to the store and buying a kidney diet. You're buying, the 3 products and then feeding specific ratios of them. So those will be helpful as well.
And did you say that worksheet, do people have to request the worksheet, or is it somewhere?
No, it'll be right there. So if you request the entire guide with all the diets, they'll be in the end. Or let's say if you said, I'm looking for the diabetes protocol, it'll be the ratio, Y, and then attached to that will be the worksheet as well. So,
That's
you know,
fantastic.
and
Sure
yeah, and
is.
we have a lot of vets, around the country who are using those protocols. And, you know, we're starting, as I sort of mentioned to you about a week ago, we're starting a vet program in 2020 where we're going to be working more closely with vets and getting more case studies so we can just, extrapolate more data to show that we can actually, provide a veterinarian recommended diet that helps disease conditions that's made of actual food. What a novel concept.
And music to my soul right there. And I can already report that several of my patients that have done the goat milk fasting have gotten tremendous results. So that's really exciting. And Billy's been a great guide for myself and my patients working through this. And now that we know that these worksheets and other resources are available, that's going to be really wonderful for people to tap into that either don't get there through me, and so many other avenues that they can take. And then I do offer phone consults as well, to provide even more comprehensive care around that. But diet again is the foundation, so it's the perfect place to start with healing and reversing health conditions and just staying healthy and in the best well-being that we can be. So fantastic.
There are a few questions. Well, there's several questions, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, the both of you. So why don't we just take a few before we finish up? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay. So here's one around supplements, because we spoke a bit about that. So Becky says, I know there is vitamin E in your food, but I heard that vitamin E is destroyed in freezing. Are there any supplements or vitamins that need to be added to the food once it's thawed?
good job, Becky.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is absolutely true. But here's the it's true but untrue. So it's not the statement destroyed by freezing isn't exactly true, because it's not all destroyed by freezing. What happens is it depletes more rapidly than other vitamins when you freeze it. So there's still going to be vitamin E there. It's just not going to be in the amounts that you froze it by. So what we do in that case is we actually add the only thing that, could be considered supplemental in our food is we add a vitamin E oil, which is still the food version of vitamin E. So a lot of people will be familiar with mixed tocopherols, which actually, preserve a lot of products. So if you go to like a natural pet store and it says like vitamin E for a preservative, it'll say tocopherols. So in nature, just for people's reference, those connect with something called tocotrienols, and that makes most of the food version of vitamin E. So we actually add the vitamin E oil. So in our case, there is nothing you need to add. Our foods, our detailed formulations are, complete and balanced. So there's nothing that you'd need to add on a regular basis. Your dog or cat will be getting plenty of vitamin E if they use Answers Pet Food.
Good
Great.
to know. And Becky just asked me that yesterday. Hi, Becky. I told her to ask you on the session today, so that was perfect.
Perfect.
Well, and I will say one more thing too, as well as the other foods in the formula that contain vitamin E, like eggs and things like that, will still retain their vitamin E. So you're still also getting those food versions of vitamin E as well. It's just we need to add extra to make sure.
I see. Is the food available in Europe?
I wish, because then I could go there. That would be amazing. Not currently. We are working on some other avenues right now, which aren't Europe, but we eventually would like to do that. It's just a matter of, we're self-funded. We're also, a smaller company, but if anyone in Europe who's a distributor is, listening right now, we're open to it. It just has to be the right situation for, us to be able to do that.
And then here we have in Hawaii too. Jane says it doesn't seem that anybody's selling it in Hawaii. So
again, I really wish someone did, because then I could take a trip to Alaska and Hawaii. Unfortunately, in America, we're not sold in Hawaii and Alaska. But again, sometimes it's just about the opportunity. We at Answers Pet Food, we spend about 120% of our lives to just even put this product out to where it's put out now.
Yeah.
And so, but open to that as well. It just depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm. That's
Is it
great.
available? Are you available in Canada, by the way, Billy? Because you said in America
Um,
or just in the 48.
we are not available in Canada yet, but without saying too much, I can say that we are,
Looking at.
potentially working on that. So we have a lot of Canadians who, every time I do a live or every time we post something, they say, "Please come to Canada. We hear you, and we want to be there for you." So
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and our Canadian friends are very conscious, nutritionally, environmentally. So surely that's why they're interested in this conversation too.
mhm.
Okay, last question. It's more disease specific, but we haven't really gotten into too much of that. So we are wondering, do you have any recommendations for Cushing's disease and for UTI?
We do. I mean, it'd be hard for me to kind of get into them fully right now, but we do
Mhm.
have both a diet for Cushing's, which is in our endocrine protocol. Um, we are actually looking at eventually kind of maybe separating those out and making a few small changes, but we've had some great results with that. And we also, for both dogs and cats, have UTI protocols as well. But also with UTI, it's kind of like you can do these protocols for extreme cases, but most of the time, if they just switch to, let's say, like a base diet of, let's say, our detailed formula and our goat milk and fish stock or turkey stock, it'll just go away anyway because the pH will rebalance. You'll get to where so most of those things are created by diets that are, moisture deficient in the wrong ingredients. So.
Right. Yep. Heavily processed and moisture deficient is probably the biggest culprit to urinary tract problems. So just switching to a raw and moisture rich food. And then when you have the fermentation on top of it and you're helping to, build the beneficial bacteria in the body and reset the immune system balance, I agree with Billy. I mean, a lot of those problems you wouldn't even have to get more detailed than that.
Yeah. Imagine how many problems would actually be solved by just a switch to such a healthy food for ourselves too.
Yeah.
It's no different.
Absolutely.
So that's why, here we go full circle back to where we started. That's why it's such an absolutely critical conversation. Yes, we're speaking about one particular brand, but yet this concept is so important to us. And why not land on a brand that we know we can rely on, that is doing so much of the work that we can't do? I can't ferment my dog's food myself. I mean, maybe I could, but I'm not going to. And so, if you do all of this, caring for the animals in the way you do, as someone that's plant-based and very compassionate towards the beings of the planet, and also aligned to feeding our dogs the carnivore diet that they naturally seek, where's the line in between there? And I think Answers has given us that. The answer to that question is, how do we meet both those needs? So thank you for creating such a phenomenal product. And thank you, Katie, for representing it so well and being able to share it out there with the world. And Billy, for all your work. And I can see you're going to work for this company until you are the old Willie, 80-year-old man. And then we'll be like, Willie, can you see me on the Be Live?
Well,
we
no,
still
it's
have
funny.
questions.
It was funny because we were driving. I was out in Nashville last week at the Holistic Veterinary Conference. I mean, Katie was too cool to be there, so I totally understand that. But no, we were driving home. we were driving home, and I was joking that I'm a lifer, for Answers Pet Food, and I said eventually I'll just be like a Walmart greeter at the plant, and I'll just be like, hey, hello. So I think that's eventually my fate. So.
Oh, good. Well, that's not bad.
You will serve it well, no matter what capacity you're in, I'm sure.
Exactly right.
Well, thank you both so much for your time and your efforts, especially on a Saturday morning, but for all of the love that you share with all of the beings, the education you put out, the care and compassion that you constantly serve to this world and to myself. So thank you both. And our animals, thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers as well. Your great questions. Keep dumping them in there too. I'll keep my eyes on it. If there's anything that I can't answer or that's maybe just a little bit too specific, I'll see if I can pull in some of the troops and get some answers for you. But do just stay connected with us. We'll keep learning and growing together and having a lot of fun while we do it. So we wish everyone a great weekend. Thank you both again. Namaste.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll post all of Billy's information below, everyone, so that you can just click right onto the links as well. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.